Hey there guys! So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about how to get into Goth. Now if you've come to this video thinking that I'm going to be talking about what clothes to buy or what makeup to do, you've come to the wrong place. Goth is really not about fashion or makeup, and you can look however you want and still be Goth, but that's besides the point. Plus, there's already a crap ton of videos that go on and on about that kind of stuff. Though I'll be fair and add a few wardrobe tips towards the end, but the majority of this video will not be about clothing or makeup, so please do keep that in mind. So for this topic, I'm gonna be breaking it down into 4 categories: the history, getting into the genre, brief wardrobe tips, and my final thoughts. However, the first thing that I really can't stress enough before watching this video is to put your pride aside. Whatever preconceived notions you have about Goth, leave that at the door. Because I'm just gonna tell you right now that Goth has been so misconstrued over the years, and for most, they may not understand or even realize that. So it's really important to clear your mind and be ready to listen if you're gonna watch this video. So that all being said, let's jump right on in. Here is a brief history of what Goth is actually about. Goth is factually a music-based subculture that came from 1970s post-punk music. The band that really kickstarted the genre was Bauhaus. However, Joy Division, The Cure, and Susie and the Banshees also played a very pivotal role in being a major influence of the first wave of goth music, which was more post-punk inspired. However, the Sisters of Mercy, who debuted their music in 1985, were a huge influence for the second wave of goth music, with their heavier take on the goth rock sound, and influenced bands like Fields of the Nephilim, The Wake, Love Like Blood, The Merry Thoughts, and Rosetta Stone, to name a few among many during the late 80s and throughout the 90s, 2000s, and even today. Along the way though, there were 4 subgenres of music that came from goth, which consist of death rock, darkwave, cold wave, and ethereal wave. And each of these subgenres took the main key characteristics of goth rock and added a few instrumental quirks, making for a slightly different sound, while still keeping to the instrumental structure of goth music. So with that little history lesson out of the way, let's get into how you can possibly ease yourself into goth music. So before I go any further, I think that I should give a short little explanation about what goth music is, so at the very least, you understand what defines it. To get the obvious out of the way, goth is not about lyrics. There is this stereotype that goth music is all about dark and or depressing lyrics, and that just isn't true, because any genre of music can have this kind of lyrical theme. No, goth, just like most other genres of music, is about its instrumental sound, and when you actually focus on it, it makes it quite easy to understand what the goth sound is. For the sake of time, I'll just say this about goth's main characteristic. The main key characteristic of goth music is the guitar. The style of guitar playing found in goth music is called scything. Scything is a guitar pattern that pretty much sounds like the guitar is shrieking. This, coupled with melodic high-pitched bass lines, and a lack of or a downplayed rhythmic backbeat from the drums, and that is your typical goth rock sound. It's kinda hard to explain, but here's an example of what scything guitar sounds like. The main thing to take away from this is that goth rock and its 4 subgenres will always have this kind of guitar in it. Yep, even in the synth-based Darkwave, Cold Wave, and Ethereal Wave subgenres, though I'll explain more about that as I go on. Anyway, that aside, let's get into how you can ease yourself into goth music through a preference of certain sounds, because I feel like this is the best way to really get into the goth genre. Now for someone who is into late 70s and or 80s music like new wave and punk rock, then I think that the first wave of goth rock would be the best place to start for you. Like I mentioned earlier, the first wave of goth rock was pretty much 1979 till about the mid 80s, and the sound was more heavily influenced by 70s post-punk music. Bauhaus, Joy Division, The Cure, and Susie and the Banshees are the popular staples of the first wave, though there are other bands like The Mission, The March Violets, Exmal Deutschland, Ghost Dance, Red Lorry, Yellow Lorry, and the Lords of the New Church, to name a few others. There was also the Sisters of Mercy and Fields of the Nephilim, though these two bands took a heavier approach with the goth rock sound, and I felt that these bands would be best saved for another sound style that I'll talk about in just a moment. Anyway, if you're just a fan of new wave music from the 80s or post-punk, the first wave of goth rock may be right up your alley, and I recommend starting out here if this is you. Here's a little sample of what first wave goth rock sounds like. Now for me personally, while I did start with 80s goth music, I was having a pretty difficult time trying to get into it. Outside of The Cure and Susie and the Banshees, it was pretty tough for me to really jive with the general 80s goth rock sound. And to be honest, I was even about to give up on the genre. That is, until I discovered the second wave of goth rock. The second wave of goth music takes a slightly more heavier approach on the goth rock sound. The main influence of this sound came from the Sisters of Mercy and Fields of the Nephilim. And while they were technically from the mid-1980s, their heavier approach to the goth rock sound as opposed to the post-punk influence style of the 1980s was a major influence for a lot of the goth bands that came out during the 1990s, the 2000s, and even today. Some notable second wave and third wave bands consist of London After Midnight, Nosferatu, Love Like Blood, Suspiria, Paralyzed Age, Corpus Delicti, The Merry Thoughts, The Wake, Rosetta Stone, Elusive, Draconian Incubus, The Flatfield, and Sans Sombre, to name a few of the very many. Like I mentioned before, when I was first getting into goth music and started with the 1980s, it wasn't a very easy transition for me, since at the time I was listening to a lot of alternative rock, mainly from the 90s, and I was finding it kinda difficult to really meld into 80s goth. And just when I was about to throw in the towel, I decided to give a try to the 90s goth sound, and that was what really helped me get into goth music. So if you're someone who's more into rockier style of music, I highly recommend checking out the second wave and third wave of goth rock. And here's a little sampling of what second wave and third wave goth rock sounds like.
Someone's eye is all I see. I sometimes hate myself. I sometimes hate myself. I look into the future. Darkness lies ahead. A shadow of a man that once was. A shadow of a man. Looks so old.
Just a flick of a wrist and just one finger push, I am careening down, and that was all it took. This world has never been a friend to me. I've seen the light and it was not what I needed.
Now maybe you're someone who likes more of an electronic sound in music. If that's the case, I think that the subgenre Darkwave would be the right place to begin with, as Darkwave is more or less the electronic style of goth music. It mixes the foundational structure of goth rock and blends it with synthesizers. In most cases, the goth style guitar is pushed to the background while synth is pushed to the forefront. You'll mostly hear the guitar in the chorus bits or in little hooks throughout the song. Some notable Darkwave bands include Clan of Zymox, The Frozen Autumn, Switchblade Symphony, Diva Destruction, CeeLo Fan, Double Echo, She Passed Away, and Drab Majesty, to name a few. Now there is something that you should keep in mind with Darkwave, because I see that some people really don't know how to tell the difference between Darkwave and other electronic genres like EBM, future pop, or even synth pop. The main thing to keep in mind about Darkwave is that actual Darkwave will always have the goth style guitar in it, whether it's used sparingly or frequently. Long story short, EBM and future pop are not goth genres of music. EBM, also referred to as electronic body music, and future pop are subgenres of industrial music. And goth music and industrial music are not the same thing. Goth and industrial are their own separate genres of music with their own subgenres. Anyway, that all being said, like I mentioned earlier, if you're a fan of electronic style music, I would suggest starting with the Darkwave genre. And here is a little sampling of what Darkwave has to offer.
I'm shrouded in darkness. I cried still wasted years. I lingered, I can't get through. Dazzled between far and near. Like the allergies
So now let's say that you're someone who prefers a more punk-like sound in music. In that case, I highly suggest trying out the subgenre death rock. Death rock pretty much takes the goth rock sound and mixes it with punk rock. Also, just to get this out of the way, death rock and death metal are not related in any way. Anyway, death rock can be fast and somewhat aggressive like your standard punk rock, but it can also be heavier in sound as well. Though I found that the heavier style is kinda rare to hear in this style of goth music. Some notable death rock bands are Community FK, Christian Death, 45 Grave, Cinema Strange, Alien Sex Fiend, All Gone Dead, Dystopian Society, and Horror Vacui. So if you're more a fan of punk style music, definitely try out death rock. And here's a little sampling of what death rock sounds like.
Talk about sugar on the six finger knees. Conversations about the holes in your hands. Walk through the garden of man's desire. Conversations about the kingdom of fire. Conversations about the kingdom of fire. What's that moving in the basement? What's that moving in the attic? Who's that walking in the shadows? Who's that walking in the streets? A kiss on my hand.
That leather in a hidden place. Dead angels fall from grace. She finds the victims on the road. Terror of the white plague. Snake. Terror of the white plague.
Resting all my time with the sleepless white, waiting for a sign for another life. I don't wanna live a life of pity with salvation. I wanna be left alone. I wanna be left alone. I don't wanna.
So now let's say that you're someone who likes a more relaxing, soothing, or atmospheric kind of sound in music. If that's the case, then I highly recommend trying out the Ethereal Wave subgenre. Ethereal Wave music takes the signature goth style guitar and adds in synth, but does it in a way where the overall sound sounds dreamy and atmospheric. Some bands even throw in some classical instruments like the violin, though this is more of a rarity. Either way, with or without the classical instruments, it's still a soothing, atmospheric sound that is great for people who like chill, relaxing music. Some notable Ethereal Wave bands include Cocktail Twins, Faith in the Muse, Trance to the Sun, Morris Syphilitica, Miranda Sex Garden, Faith in Disease, This Incision, Lycia, and B Forest. And now here's a little sampling of what Ethereal Wave sounds like. And last but not least, if you like a more gloomy, cold kind of sound, cold wave may be the right subgenre of goth for you. Cold wave music takes the first wave of goth style guitar and mixes it with synth, but does it in a way where the sound sounds, well, cold, for lack of a better word. Like Ethereal Wave, it can be quite atmospheric. So if this sounds appealing to you at all, then I highly recommend trying out cold wave music. Some notable cold wave bands consist of Asylum Party, Trisome 21, Lebanon Hanover, Kaz Product, Mary Goes Round, Shadow Age, and Little Nemo. And here's a little sampler of cold wave music. Now, I did think of one other type of sound that one may be wanting to find in goth music, and that is a heavier sound similar to metal. Unfortunately, if you're a metalhead looking to find goth music that sounds like metal, that's gonna be a tough one because goth music is like the polar opposite of metal music because it's just not a heavy genre in general. The best I can try to recommend are heavier goth rock bands like the Sisters of Mercy, Golden Apes, Miasma, Voodoo Church, Dreadful Shadows, Draconian Incubus, Sans Somber, and the Merciful Nuns. Here's a little sample of what they sound like. And yeah, that's pretty much the gist of goth music, and I hope that this little breakdown helped in some way. But while I'm on the subject of music, here's a quick little thing about other genres that can sometimes be labeled as goth when they're not. These genres typically consist of synth pop, gothic metal, doom metal, black metal, symphonic metal, nu metal, visual kei, dark cabaret, the industrial music genre and its many subgenres, trip hop, neoclassical, psychobilly, and horror punk. Long story short, these genres did not come from goth music, as they don't use any of the key characteristics of what define goth music, hence them not being related to it. They're their own separate genres of music that just happen to also be darker in style. That's pretty much it. Now that all being said, if there's one thing that I cannot stress enough to newcomers who are just starting out with goth, it would be to take your time. There's no need to rush getting into goth music, and it's just best to slowly ease yourself into the genre because goth music is a very out there kind of music, and can take a while to get into. And if you dive headfirst into it, and do nothing but binge on goth music, you're gonna risk burning yourself out, and that's just no fun at all. So yeah, just take it nice and slow. Take your time getting into the music because again, there really is no rush. So the thing that I would suggest to get started on this music journey is creating a playlist. If you have a YouTube channel, start up your own goth playlist and slowly add music that you like to it. Again, just take it nice and slow. Try out 2 to 3 songs a day or every other day. And if you like what you hear, add it to the playlist. As far as the search process goes, I'll leave a link to some sites, other playlists, and some basic bands to get you started. And even if you don't have a YouTube account but have something like Spotify, you can find these bands on there as well. And finally, my very last tip on this is don't be afraid to ask questions. Speaking for myself, I am always open to helping people get into the music, and I know that some others feel the same way. There is no such thing as a stupid question, and it is worse to remain ignorant in the long run, so don't be afraid to reach out and interact with people within the scene, because there are people, myself included, who would be more than happy to help you out. So now, some of you may ask, when does one become a goth as you're going through this journey? Just when does one graduate from baby bat to goth? In my honest opinion, I personally like to go by the 5x5 to 10x10 rule. When the person can find at least 5 goth bands regardless of the subgenre, along with at least 5 songs from these 5 bands that they enjoy, and the person becomes comfortable discussing goth music with others, is when I think one graduates from baby bat to goth. Because this shows confidence that you understand goth enough to be okay with talking about it with others within the scene. And even if you don't have a large library of goth bands and songs, you at least have a general idea of what goth music sounds like and have managed to find enjoyment or likeness for it, and that you're open to expanding that goth library as well as talking about it with other goths. Yeah, that's just what I think. Just remember to keep saving the songs that you like and want to listen to again in your playlist. And especially when starting out, just keep your ears open and listen to how the music sounds so that you can train your ears to understand the goth sound. Now before I end this segment, I do have to make this one and final point about the music and specifically address a certain ad hominem that gets lobbed at people who say a particular phrase, and that phrase is that goths listen to goth music. Here's the deal. Goths can and do listen to other kinds of music, and that is perfectly fine. But listen and listen well. When people like me say that goths listen to goth music, we are not saying that that is the only music that they listen to. Listening to one genre of music would get very stale and boring, and it's good to listen to other kinds of music to give yourself a break. But at the end of the day, a goth is someone who listens to goth music amongst the other kinds of music that they also enjoy. It's really not any different than a metalhead who listens to metal like Iron Maiden, Mastodon, or Lamb of God one moment, and then tunes into Nickelback, Green Day, or Britney Spears in the next. But yet, it's their likeness for metal music that makes them a metalhead. It's the same thing with goth, where a goth will listen to goth music like the Sisters of Mercy, She Passed Away, or London After Midnight one moment, and then tune into Blink-182, System of a Down, or Linkin Park in the next. But yet, it's their likeness for goth music that makes them goth. I really hope that this all makes sense. The underlying thing that we are saying is that in order to be goth, you have to have enjoyment or likeness for goth music amongst the other music you already like. That is literally all you need to be a goth. It really doesn't matter what clothes you wear, whether or not you wear makeup or not, your hair or hair color, your personality, nada. Just enjoyment for the music. The other stuff is just an optional bonus, but not a necessity. Now I know that I said that this video was not going to be about fashion because at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what you look like when it comes to goth. However, I do understand that some people do like to express themselves through clothing, myself included. And I'm sure that some who may be watching would like to develop a darker tone to their personal style but may not know where to start. And so for that, I'll just give a little bit of advice and some tips. The primary one that I highly recommend that won't break the bank is building up your wardrobe with simple, inexpensive black clothing and to let your accessories help bring out the outfit. That's usually what I do myself, and believe me, it'll save you a lot of money in the long run because I'm telling you, you'd be surprised at some of the looks that you can create while on a budget. The only thing that may be potentially pricey is if you want a pair of boots. And honestly, the best advice that I can give is to find a pair that you like on an online shop and then save some money towards the pair that you're interested in. You can also wait for things like holiday discounts during Black Friday, Cyber Monday, or the month of December, because boots can sometimes go on sale during this time of the year. And also, don't be afraid to check out your local thrift stores for clothing and shoes, because sometimes you can get lucky and find some really cool stuff there for a very cheap price. As for accessories, you can find some on online shops like Etsy, Amazon, and eBay. And heck, you can even learn some simple DIY projects to make some of your own necklaces and other various accessories with some of the tutorials here on YouTube. A lot of the jewelry that I personally wear are necklaces that I DIY'd myself, mainly my rosaries. And you also have things like waist belts, bracelets, wristbands, and so on that can really spruce up a simplistic outfit. And for style inspiration, if you're wanting to genuinely add some style traits that come from goth music, the key words to use are trad goth, romantic goth, and death rock. These are the main styles that came directly out of goth music. So just look these styles up on image hosting sites and go from there, taking bits and pieces that you like and adding them to your own style. And look, as far as things like Victorian goth, gothic Lolita, cyber goth, pastel goth, or any of those other misappropriated goth styles, I'm not in any way saying that you can't or shouldn't wear them. If you do like these styles, then wear them. But just keep in mind that these styles are not actual goth styles in the sense that they didn't come from the actual goth scene. But also know that so long as you enjoy actual goth music, taking inspiration from these non-goth styles doesn't make you any less of a goth. So just remember that and have fun in developing your personal style. Now the last thing that I want to address before ending this video is what happens if you just don't like goth music. You gave it a try and you just couldn't really get into it. Can you still be a goth without liking goth music? To answer that question, no. Because goth, at the end of the day, is a music-based scene, and it would be rather redundant to call yourself a goth when you don't like goth music, the thing that goth is centered around. It's like calling yourself a metalhead when you don't listen to metal music, or a punk when you don't listen to punk music. And it's the same with goth. But let's say that you do enjoy dark and macabre things, and that you find the beauty in darkness. That's perfectly fine, and there is a word for that. That word is darkly inclined. And I want you to know that you don't have to be a goth to like dark things. You can be a darkly inclined person, and it doesn't make your likeness for dark things any less valid. It just means that you like dark, macabre, and/or spooky things. Nothing more, nothing less. And it's totally fine. So don't feel like you have to be a goth in order to enjoy dark and/or macabre things, because that's just not true. And truth be told, goth music just isn't for everyone, and if that's the case for you, that's totally fine. And you can still enjoy the dark things that you like without being a goth. So with all that said, I hope you found this video to be helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them down below in the comment section, and I'll be sure to answer them as I love to interact with those who take the time to comment. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please be sure to leave a like, comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more content coming soon. I'm Decadence, and hope you all have a great day. Thanks for watching. Take care, guys.